This is the final race.
The Dreamcast is home to a lot of games, and a lot of those said games are timeless classics that will be remembered for decades. However, in my everlasting quest to collect as many Dreamcast games as physically possible, I come across games that are far more niche and unknown. For every Sonic Adventure and Shenmue, there's a K.O. the Kangaroo and Planet Ring, shameless plug. But yes, in collecting for Sega's Final Machine, I more often than not come across games that I have heard little to nothing about, and Sega Extreme Sports is one of those games. Sega Extreme Sports is a game released for the Sega Dreamcast in Europe and America near the end of 2000 and in Japan in 2001. The game also released on Windows in 2001 as well. Now this game is a bit of a weird one. In North America, the game dropped the Sega tag and is just called Extreme Sports, spelled with an X, because of course it is, it's 2000. The crazy hardcore American release was handled by Infogrames, who published the game. However, in PAL and Japanese territories, Sega picked up the game and published it directly, also changing the name to Sega Extreme Sports, spelled correctly with an E. They also labelled the game part of their Sega Sports series. This is very peculiar. Sega Sports was one of the most popular, if not the most popular series on the Dreamcast across all regions really. Their NBA and NFL games are genuinely some of the highest rated games of all time to this day. Sega Sports was massive, so I find it strange Sega happily took this game as another in their Sega Sports catalogue for PAL and Japanese territories, but not North America. Sega Sports was arguably the biggest in America, so I do find it strange that when it came to the North American release, Sega essentially washed their hands of the game, leaving the publishing to be picked up by Infogrames. Then there's also the PC release in 2001. This release had nothing to do with Sega and was handled by the aforementioned Infogrames in America. For the European release, a publisher called Empire Interactive took up the reins, but this time the title was changed again for the PC release to Pepsi Max Extreme Sports, so I guess Pepsi decided to stick their finger in this pie too. I'm going to be looking at the UK PAL release of the game, Sega Extreme Sports. Not that it makes any difference really, as from what I can tell, aside from the title change, there really is no difference between this game regionally at all. Regardless of the odd and a bit confusing release of the game, I'm interested to see what this game has to offer. I do love me a good arcade extreme sports game. SSX on PlayStation 2 instantly comes to mind for me. Anyway, let's give this game a shot. So to start, there is no story at all, which is completely expected for this type of game. Upon booting it up, we're just thrown straight into the main menu. One thing I will give the game from the offset is that the menus and user interface seem really polished and well done. They have a sharp 2000s look to them that really pops, and everything just appears to have a lot of character and polish. First thing I jumped into was the championship mode. There are 3 medals to win: easy, hard and extreme. Each of the medals consists of a series of back-to-back stages taking place in various locations across the world with a variety of different extreme sports. The easy medal takes place across 3 different locations, but the hard and extreme medals take place across 4. When starting a championship, you have the option to pick from 4 characters: Noel from England, who's 21, Raja from Jamaica, who's 22, Nina, who's 18 from Sweden, and Kath, who's 19 from America. From what I can tell, these characters make absolutely no difference gameplay wise and are purely just a cosmetic thing. However, with that said, I do appreciate the variety and the diverse group of people from a wide range of different countries. Anyways, I'm from the UK, so I went with Noel. After that, you put in your name and then you're off. So the gameplay here is quite a bit different from what I expected. Initially, before playing this game, I was under the impression that it would function similar to other extreme sports games, where you have a list of different extreme sports to pick from and play individually. But this game works much differently to that. As I said before, when playing a championship, you go through a variety of locations across the world, but in Sega Extreme Sports, even within one location, you frequently switch to different extreme sports multiple times within the race. And I have to say, I love this fast-paced, hectic structure to the game. Okay, let me explain. So the first stage the game throws me in is the Himalayas. The race is always me and the other 3 characters you picked from earlier. The race begins with us all on snowboards sliding down the steep mountain. As we reach the lower part of the mountain, I skid to a stop with my snowboard and run to a hang glider. This enters the next section of the race. A plane takes off and pulls me off at a blistering speed. Now I'm controlling this hang glider, trying to dodge the red balloons that slow me down and hit the blue ones that speed me up. Eventually I see a red flare in the distance that indicates where I can land. I'm now given the option to release the cord tied to the plane whenever I'm ready. So I release myself from the plane and glide down to the landing zone as best I can. Then, as soon as I've landed, I make a sprint for my quad bike, entering the final section of the race. It's a dash to the finish line on quad bikes. This fusion of the different sports is such a fun and unique structure I've never really seen in an extreme sports game. It creates an atmosphere of a mad rush to the finish line and chocks the race full of variety. The tracks feel pretty damn big as well, and despite each extreme sport only having a section of the level, they all feel the perfect length really. I rarely feel like I haven't experienced enough of a particular sport before being moved on to the next one. Another fun mechanic that just adds to the frantic pace is the run feature. In the transition stage between finishing one sport and starting another, your character literally runs to whatever it is that's next, a hang glider or bike for example. However, when running, you're prompted to mash the A button as fast as you can to make your character run faster. Again, this is just a little thing, but it just adds to that feeling of really staying in the race and rushing to get to, say, the quad bike before your opponents do. So the structure and pacing of this game I really am a big fan of. It puts a unique spin on the levels and really helps keep the game fresh and varied. But now let's actually delve into the different sports you partake in the game, and there is a fair amount of them. So I'll start off with the snowboarding. Snowboarding I think is probably my favourite sport in the game. None of the sports in these games are simulation-like, everything leans pretty heavily on the arcadey feel and I'm a big fan of it. The snowboarding sections give me a similar vibe to SSX, however I would say it doesn't feel as fleshed out and tight as SSX does. It is a bit more simple and clunky, but on its own it still stands up as a very fun representation of the sport, and it's definitely not sluggish by any means. First thing I'll give to the sport is the feeling of momentum. Most of the sections where you snowboard in this game tend to be pretty damn steep, and you really do feel it. The momentum physics in this game feel pretty damn well done. If you make the right turns and flow with the track, you can really get some serious speed here. The areas are also often quite wide as well, giving you a lot of room to make your own path and find the best routes. The controls are pretty simple but work really well. You use the R trigger to accelerate and the L trigger to brake. You jump by holding down the A button and releasing it. The longer you hold the button in, the higher you jump. Timing these jumps at the right time on certain parts of the level can result in some serious airtime. When in the air, you also have the option to perform tricks. By holding either Y, B or A and moving the analog stick, you can perform a variety of tricks. Holding the A button will have your character hold the back of his board, holding B will have him hold the middle of the board, and holding Y will have him hold the front of the board. While holding any of these buttons, moving the analog stick in any direction will move your character around. You have full 360-degree control and can pull off some serious moves in the air. The trick system has a fair amount of depth to it and it really is fun to master. There is an addictive game loop to trying to get as many tricks as you can in just before hitting the ground. You also need to make sure your board's facing straight forward and slightly up when landing tricks or you'll just fall off. So while initially pretty simple, there is a decent amount of depth to the trick system and it is fun to master. The trick system is also something that is crucial to making you place first. Performing tricks in the game will grant you boosts, which is something I have yet to mention. While on the ground, you have a boost meter in the bottom right corner. This boost meter can be filled up by performing various tricks. By holding X, the boost button, you will accelerate forward at a much faster pace. This boost is key to getting some serious speed on slopes and also helping you maintain an advantage on the competition when going through parts of the stage that aren't quite as steep and you need more speed. There is a constant incentive to pull off tricks in the game. This boost is key to getting some serious speed on slopes and also helping you maintain an advantage on the competition when going through parts of the stage that aren't quite as steep and you need more speed. There is a constant incentive to pull off tricks in the game and be daring, as not only is it just satisfying to do, but it rewards you with boosts which you need if you want to place first. Last thing to mention with the snowboarding section is the grind rails. Throughout the snowboarding sections there are grind rails spread out sporadically across the map. These ground rails are a great opportunity to help you get a shortcut in the level and earn some boost. Grinding in this game is super easy and essentially completely automated. Simply jump towards the ground rail and you should just attach to it. I like how easy it is to actually get on the rails. It's not frustrating at all to do, and the hitboxes seem to be really generous, but I do think it would have been cool to have a bit more to actually do on the rail rather than just watch your character slide down and wait. This would have been helped if the actual rails were a bit more intricate. As they are, they're essentially just straight rails downwards to help you get some speed. It would have been cool to see some rails that had more intricate designs and require more from the player, but with that said, getting on a rail is still super satisfying to pull off, and grinding also fills up your boost meter, so there is a clear incentive to use them. The rails, while simple, are also very short, so you're never actually on one for more than a few seconds. This short burst approach works well with the simple gameplay that revolves around them, and they never outstay their welcome. Overall, I would say this game is starting off incredibly strong with the first sport, snowboarding. The aforementioned physics can occasionally be a bit off if I hit a wall or delve off too far from the desired path, but it's a very rare thing, and overall the gameplay feels fleshed out and really fun to play and master.
Begin to say romantic things, then just etc.
Next, let's talk about quad bike sections. This is another part of the game that is just generally fun. These sections feel fast and the controls again feel tight. Handling is very good and the acceleration on the vehicles feels top notch. Again, the physics here are very good. Your quad bike will react to the different terrain accordingly, and you really do feel off-road as you bounce and skid around on rocky roads and steep hills. The quad bike sections also use the boost and the trip mechanic again that I mentioned when talking about the snowboarding sections. Pressing the X button will let you use the boost, accelerating you forward at a much faster rate. I found the boost to be especially useful with the quad bikes when it came to getting up hills and going off ramps. The trick system is here as well, but it works a little differently now, and I only really got the hang of it near the end of my time with the game. With the quad bike you can perform tricks both on the ground while riding and in the air. To perform tricks you hold the Y button and then move the analog stick in a variety of ways. If you perform a trick on the ground, you need to make sure you're on a straight and not so uneven terrain, as if your quad goes over too bumpy terrain as you're pulling off your trick, you will just fall. The ground tricks have a good sense of risk versus reward to them. On the one hand, performing one of these tricks will result in your quad bike slowing down briefly as you're not accelerating while performing said trick, but on the other hand, the reward for doing the trick will give you a lot of boost which you can use to your advantage in a race. There is also the tricks you can perform in the air. You pull these off the exact same way you do on the ground, but obviously it's while you're in the air. These are also fun to pull off, but they are quite risky, with your quad being quite heavy, so you don't quite get as much airtime as you would with, say, the snowboard. Because of this, you need to make sure you only attempt a trick if you've got enough airtime to do so, and also make sure you don't attempt it too late in your jump. If you land on the ground before finishing a trick, this will result in you falling off your quad and face planting in the dirt, which is something you really want to avoid in these tense races where the opponents are never far behind you. So yeah, again, overall I think quad bikes is another well represented sport in this game. The mechanics are not overly complicated, but at the same time there is enough there to really sink your teeth into and learn. You can get quite good at the game by learning the best way to do tricks and use your boost, all in correlation with the steep and vast level design. Now it's time for mountain biking. Now this is one that I didn't quite click with as much as the others at first, but after getting used to the controls and adjusting, I will say again, I think this is a fun gameplay style. So with the mountain bikes, things work slightly differently. You press the R trigger to accelerate and the L trigger to brake. However, you also have a stamina bar that depletes as you accelerate. If you just hold the accelerate trigger forward, very quickly you will run out of stamina and slow to a snail's pace. The trick is finding a balance to where you can keep accelerating, giving yourself time to breathe and letting the stamina bar fill up. The best way to do this is with airtime. So like with all the sports, really the terrain and level design here is very steep, maybe the steepest in the game. By holding and releasing the A button, your character will do a jump. It works just like the jumping does with the snowboards. If you jump at the right time, you can get some serious airtime in these parts of the levels. The airtime is where you aren't pedaling and your stamina gauge will fill up. There is a real trick with finding the right route in the levels to where you can get the fastest time but also the highest jumps so you can refill your stamina gauge. However, the other benefit to the jump system is the tricks. Just like with the snowboarding and with the ATVs, the boost mechanic returns here. Holding X will give you boost, propelling you forward. To earn this boost, you have to perform tricks. With the mountain bike you can only perform tricks when in the air, and it works very similar to the trick system with the quad bike. When in the air, hold the Y button and move the analog stick to perform the trick. However, the tricks are much easier to perform here compared to the quad bike. Firstly, the level design for these sections is much more steep, and the fact that you're on a mountain bike makes you much more light and gives you the ability to jump a lot higher. All three of these factors combined results in the mountain bike sections featuring a lot of extended airtime, which is where you can go crazy with tricks and pull off as many as you can. These tricks add to your boost, and again, it just all links back to that rewarding loop of getting air and performing tricks to get boost to get and stay ahead in the race. Those are the core three types of sports you race in SEGA Extreme Sports, and while mechanically they are all very similar with how they have the arcadey feel with the boost and the trick system, each different sport feels varied and controls different enough to feel distinct from one another. Just because I've mastered the mountain bike, it does not mean I'm going to just breeze through the quad bike sections. I really found myself having to adjust my playstyle for each of the different sports I was partaking in.
So strong and real legends.
I also forgot to add on that on all of these sports you also had the ability to hit other players when they were near to you. This is a simple but really fun addition for all the sports. It makes things that much more tense, as when you're close to an opponent you run the risk of getting hit and thrown off course. The hits really can knock you back and ruin your run as well. But on the flip side, successfully soccer punching your rival in the face and seeing them swerve off course is incredibly satisfying. While those are the main big three sports, there are more that you will play through in the game. It's just these sections aren't as fleshed out or extended as the aforementioned core 3. There is also bungee jumping. The bungee jump is only ever at the beginning or the end of a race, and they're always a very short section, close to a QTE really. Your character jumps off a ledge attached to a bungee jump cord. As he jumps down to the ground, he will reach a metal bar. It's up to you to press A at the right time and grab the bar so you can release yourself from the cord and carry on with the race. Pretty simple. There is a little bit more depth there though. On your way down, by holding Y again and moving the analog stick, you can perform a variety of tricks, which in turn will fill up your boost gauge. This makes these sections feel far less automated and far more fun. It's about pulling off as many tricks as you can in the limited time you have before reaching the pole. The more tricks you pull off, the more boost you will get. But if you try to pull off too many tricks, you risk missing the bar and not grabbing it, seriously slowing you down and giving your competitors a major advantage. There is also the speed gliding. Now this is, while arguably very simple, something I really like to do throughout the game. So more often than not when finishing a particular sport, say snowboarding, you won't just run into a quad bike which is right there. You will run into a glider attached to a plane, and this is where speed gliding takes place. Speed gliding has you in a glider being pulled along by a plane at a very fast speed. These sections feel so energetic and really highlight just how vast these levels are. You fly through so much level so quickly, it really makes these environments feel real and well realised, but I'll touch on that more in the graphics section of this video. The gameplay is pretty simple here, as you're being pulled along by the plane, avoid and dodge the red balloons but hit the blue ones to increase your speed. And while simple, this again I think is just quite fun. It's a breath of fresh air and allows you to really take in and enjoy the scope of the environments that you're in, especially since they're all real world locations. You move around with basic flight controls through the analog stick, but you can also do a tight turn left and right with the L and R triggers. Another fun part is the landing section. Eventually you will see red flares on the ground indicating the area to land, and you're given the option to release the cord, attaching you to the plane whenever you're ready. There is a learning curve to timing pulling the cord at just the right time so you glide down and land as best you can. The closer you are to the landing zone, the less distance your character has to run to the next sport or sometimes the finish line. While speed gliding is simple, this is a fun section that never lasts too long and outstays its welcome, and it really makes you feel like you travel a large distance in these races. Now last one is sky surfing. I had no idea this was a thing in the game, so you can imagine my shock when this happened. Sky surfing is probably my least favourite of all the sports, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad. I just never feel like I really ever properly clicked with the controls like I did with the other sports. Sky surfing is a straight transition from just normal surfing usually, but sometimes a level begins with it. You're essentially free falling with your board down towards the ground. The analog stick will move you forward, back and left and right. There are flares on the ground indicating where you need to land. There is also a trick system here as well. By holding the Y button and moving the analog stick, you can perform a variety of tricks. tricks. These tricks will fill up your boost meter, which you can either save for the next sport or use in the sky with sky surfing. There are also rings to fly through here that are supposed to guide you down the best path to reach the landing zone, but I never managed to get through them with the controls and always just veered off and did my own thing. I found for me, I just veered off and did as many tricks as I could so I fill up my boost meter. Then when I'm low to the ground, swing back round and drop at the landing zone. I never followed the ring's path, just because I couldn't really. I found them too hard to reach with the controls. Despite not feeling the controls are that intuitive with the sky surfing sections, I still did have fun with them just for the spectacle, and the sections are always super short. I was just happy for an opportunity to where I could fill up my boost meter as much as possible. However, it would have been nice if the controls felt a little bit less loose in these sections. Now, just to truly see everything this game had to offer, I actually dragged my girlfriend on this to try out the split screen mode. This game supports local multiplayer between 2 people, and I really was having quite a fun time with the game, so I thought I'd try it out. There isn't really a whole lot to say here. The core game I think is really fun, and even in single player the goal is still just a race, so by extension the multiplayer is really fun as well. Now granted, this would be a lot more fun if you're playing against someone who is actually familiar with the game and not just dragged into it. Obviously it just wasn't fair because I was pretty good at the game at this point and my girlfriend had never played it before in her life, but the fundamentals still show this would be a really solid time between 2 players. Performance is pretty good as well. I didn't really notice any hitches aside from an occasional bit of slowdown. It's a shame this game never supported online play. It would have been a really unique online title in the Dreamcast online enabled game catalogue. I actually read an interview conducted by the Dreamcast Junkyard with the then CEO of Inner Loop Studios, Henning Rockling, who said that online play did cross the team's mind, but back in those days of very early online gaming, it was too much of a risk for the studio to invest the time and money into implementing an online structure into the game. Okay, graphics and audio. I really do think in a lot of aspects this is a very good looking and impressive game. So the Dreamcast itself came out at a very weird time that kind of always hindered it throughout its short life. It was the first 6th gen console, which also consisted of the PlayStation 2, the original Xbox and the GameCube. However, it released significantly earlier than all of those other consoles, releasing in 1998 Japan and 1999 the rest of the world. Because of this, for the time the Dreamcast was on the market, the gaming industry was still very much in a 5th gen mindset. Not only were consoles like the N64 and especially the Sony PlayStation still incredibly popular, but developers were still in that early stage of 3D development. They were still finding their footing with how to make 3D games. In the 6th generation, developers really started to grasp 3D game development properly and things became a lot more realised. Late 6th gen games can look really nice to this day. However, the Dreamcast wasn't around for this development, dying in 2001, so unfortunately you find a lot of Dreamcast games end up looking closer to an N64 or PlayStation game rather than a true 6th gen game. This isn't the case for all the titles, as there were a decent amount of games for the console that did actually utilise the system's hardware, but it was an issue that plagued the console. In reality, the Dreamcast is only slightly less powerful than the PlayStation 2. It is a 6th gen console that could have handled a lot more than it ever did really. However, Sega Extreme Sports is quite impressive in my opinion. In terms of character models and animation, I wouldn't say it's anything to really write home about, but in terms of the environments and the lighting, I think this game is exceptional for the console. The biggest thing that stuck out to me when playing was the sheer size and scope of these levels. Dreamcast games tend to have a common thing where skyboxes are very small for levels, especially when playing on a flat screen. You could really see the skybox is just that, a box, and not a very big one at that. Many games like Sonic Adventure don't master the illusion of scale very well, and it's clear that you're just playing around in a small skybox. But Sega Extreme Sports is incredibly vast, with the environments stretching out for absolutely miles. It really is incredibly impressive for the console. What's more, there is no popping at all really. The whole map is loaded in and it stretches out for miles. This really made me feel like I was actually in the locations the game said I was, like the Himalayas. It felt like a real vast location. The lighting again is another notable aspect of the game. The sun really radiates through the environments and each different location has different lighting to match that looks really nice. From Maui with the sun sun-kissed hot skies to the cloudy blue skies of the Himalayas, the game always looks really nice with the environments. I think the vastness and sheer scale of the levels can be attributed to the fact that this game is built off the tech Inner Loop created for a previous game, Joint Strike Fighter, which released for the PC in 1997. That game is a flight simulator which pretty much needs to have vast large spaces, so it explains how this game manages to have such large feeling levels. There is one pretty big downside to the graphics, unfortunately, that do detract from the experience a bit. You may have noticed when watching this video that as you approach the oncoming environment in this game, the land seems to morph and like stretch to become more detailed. It's not masked well at all, especially not on a flat screen. Maybe on a CRT it's less noticeable, but as I've played it, it really can be quite distracting. The ground is literally morphing and moving like 3 feet in front of you. It feels like I've took a tab of acid before the race, and it is a bit distracting. While it does drag things down a bit, after adjusting to the bizarre look it creates, the visual design of the game still stands pretty strong. The sheer scope of the levels and the detailed environments, along with superb lighting, managed to keep the game looking impressive despite pretty stiff animations at times, not incredibly detailed character models, and the aforementioned weird ground warp thing. The music is another big standout for the game. Inner Loop licensed music from Ninja Tune, which is a record label I admittedly had heard nothing of before this game, but it has some serious tunes. The music goes so well with the sports and has a really unique sound I can't really say is similar to anything else I've played on the console, or in general really. Take a listen to some highlights.
Then I thought, I'm gonna play a bossa nova rhythm behind it. But it's slightly strange and sounds different, you know. Begin to say romantic things, then just etc.
Fish dances, fish dances, fish dances, fish dances. Rock dances, rock dances, rock dances. Star dances, star dances, star dances, star dances. Insect dances, insect dances, insect dances, insect dances. Plant dances, plant dances, plant dances, plant dances. Crocodile dances, crocodile dances, crocodile dances. Elephant dancing, elephant dancing, elephant dancing, elephant dancing. And strange animal scenes like fish dances, fish dances, fish dances. Rock dances, rock dances, rock dances.
Overall, I am really glad I properly tried this game and gave it the time I think it deserved. This game is never really talked about when discussing great games for the Dreamcast, and I think that's a bit of a shame. I would definitely say this game is a bit of a hidden gem for the console. There's not a tremendous amount of depth here, but it has an incredibly fun gameplay loop, and each sport feels fleshed out enough to where you can really sink your teeth into the game and become a pro. The graphics are a standout, and especially the sheer scope of the levels. The music really fits the game, and the overall aesthetic is just great. Maybe I am a little bit biased, there is just something about the Dreamcast aesthetic, but if you can definitely check this out, it's super cheap and a great time. Anyway, thank you all for watching guys, and thank you for your patience. You would not fucking believe the amount of shit that has happened in my personal life since my last video. Next video we're revisiting the Blue Hedgehog again, so stay tuned, catch you in the next one.